I used video editing software to layer each of the images on top of each other, but used temporary frames for ghosts so that I could see everything together as I cut down shots that lingered for too long or reordered shots to tell the story better, before I finished the final effects with Ghost. There were other small issues I had encountered during editing. I did not use separate cameras for cuts within scenes during animation, so I had excessive motion blur whenever a camera would jump into a new position. I rendered all of Ghost's frames without motion blur, so to solve this problem I only had to go back and manually render each frame that followed a cut in both the base scene and fog layers. Occasionally there would be glaring problems that I would discover through the post-processing of the film that I would go back and reanimate if necessary, which then required renders to be redone as well. One prominent example of this is in a scene when Ghoul takes a selfie with a discarded cell phone. In my initial animation, Ghoul's shoes disappeared noticeably into the floor, though I had not picked up on it until very far into post-processing. I reanimated this scene to fix her feet, and in the final film, it appears as it should. After rendering and editing was completely finished, I still needed to apply visual effects to the film. Though this was not chronologically the next thing I did, it makes sense to discuss it here. This process was relatively simple, if time-consuming. I took all of the frames for Ghost and applied a glowing effect to them in Adobe After Effects, then brought these new glowing frames into my main video. From there, I applied a color-correcting filter to the whole project, which intensified my colors and increased the visibility of some of my scenes which were previously too dark. I also decided to play back Ghost's frames at half speed compared to everything else, which further separates her from the world the corporeal characters inhabit. That was everything it took to complete the visual aspects of my animation. With all that done, I had a complete film, all the way through, visually appearing the way I wanted it to. The only problem that was left was the film was completely silent. While what I had written was technically a silent film as it had no dialogue, it was not my intention for the film to contain no audio. That left me with the task of now producing sound effects and music for my film, and I fortunately had a great deal of experience and high-quality tools available to do it. Before he passed away, my stepfather had given me a very good microphone to use in my music projects, of which he was very supportive. I was able to use this microphone in a process known as Foley. Foley takes its name from sound designer Jack Foley, who used instruments and various objects to create the sound effects heard in radio plays. I couldn't get access to a recording studio environment like one might find in Hollywood productions, but I was able to follow the basic concepts of Foley. I queued up a preview of my footage and watched my characters moving through the world. As I did so, I stomped around in old shoes, rustled jackets, crinkled papers, and threw rocks into piles in front of my microphone in time with the movements on the screen. I took these recordings and manipulated them into the sounds that you can hear my characters and the objects they interact with making throughout the film. In a similar fashion, I also provided voice acting for my antagonists. They didn't need to speak, but in order to make things seem more natural, I recorded various grunts, snickers, laughs, and shouts doing different voices for each of the monster hunters. This served to help further bring them to life. Ghost and Ghoul themselves also needed voices, but I didn't want them to just sound like people. For Ghoul, I had a concept outlined in the script where she would speak using a voice like a distorted banjo. My goal was for her to sound disturbing and monstrous, while avoiding the typical snarling and growling sounds associated with undead monsters. I didn't end up using a banjo sound, but I simulated my original concept using a synthesized instrument with grating low-end tones. In a fashion similar to Foley, I played keys on my keyboard in time with the moments I believed Ghoul should be vocalizing, attempting to imitate the emotions she would be expressing with the notes I had played. This alone did not capture the sound I was hoping for in Ghoul, so I recorded myself vocalizing in short grunts in time with the notes I had played. and then used autotune to tie the pitch of my voice to the pitch of the recorded notes. This distorted, abstractly musical sound is what created Ghoul's final voice. Ghost's voice required an entirely separate process. I took my inspiration from Louis Zong's Ghost Choir, where he chose to have his ghosts sing using harmonized sine waves. I created 2 sound effects for Ghost, using notes that harmonized in a minor key to create a haunting tone. The first sound effect was simply a rising arpeggio of notes, while the second began with a similar arpeggio, then held for a few measures and fell again. I brought these 2 sounds into a composition with my reference footage, then began to manipulate the sounds by stretching them out, speeding them up, cutting them short, and altering the pitch over the whole film to create the various sounds and emotional noises that Ghost needed to make. I then took this new audio track and brought it into my composition software. To make the sound of Ghost's voice more ethereal, I played it backwards and applied a long, echoing reverb effect to it. I then reversed the sound again, so it was now playing forwards, and added the same reverb effect again. As a result, I now had a complex ghostly sound for Ghost, which was built from only 2 original sound effects. With all my sound effects and animation finalized, I also needed to add music to the film. I wrote all of the music for the film myself in an attempt to capture the emotions that I wanted the audience to feel during the various scenes. Normally, I animate to music I have already written, so writing music to match with existing video is a reversal of my usual process. Fortunately, I was able to find tempos and rhythms which matched appropriately with the scenes that I had crafted. I chose to use synthetic orchestral instruments to emulate the soundtracks of the old Legend of Zelda games which inspired me. I avoided using overtly electronic instruments except for emphasis, as I wanted the unnatural electronic sounds to be associated with Ghost and Ghoul. This is accentuated in the final piece of the soundtrack, titled Ghost and Ghoul, which features a smooth sine tone being paired with a harsh, grating synthetic instrument and mirrors the harmony between Ghost and Ghoul featured in the animation. With music, sound, animation, post-processing, modeling, rigging, and everything else complete, I had a short film. It took almost a year in total, with more than 6 months of almost non-stop work, and I'm very proud of what I was able to accomplish. I believe I've made my voice clearly heard within the conversation of animated film production and all fields related to it. Thank you very much for watching this behind-the-scenes look at the creation of Ghost and Ghoul. I hope you enjoyed getting this insight into the processes I used to create the film from start to finish, and I also hope that you enjoyed watching the film itself. This project means a very great deal to me, as I've spent most of my waking hours thinking about it for the past year, and represents a thorough display of many of the skills that I have developed throughout my life.